bevo.com.
It was in your great book, Allan Leighton, on leadership, you interview pretty much the who's who of the business world to identify if there's any common characteristics amongst them all. So did you find anything that was common to all of them?
There's two things. There's always this thing about, can you identify these characteristics? Because if you could, then if you could inject them in everybody, that's fine. They're all very different. They're all very, very different, and that's the point. But they're all pretty focused. They're all pretty good at communicating, and none of them are in it because it's a popularity contest. And if you look at it through, that's what you see. And then there are different characters. If you take Terry Leahy on one extreme and Philip Green on the other extreme, two different characters you wouldn't see or meet. They're very different, but they do a lot of the same things, just in a very different way. And that's why I say, everybody says, well, who's name the one person, go through the normal boring stuff. And in my view, I always say there isn't one. They say, oh, you just want to be political. And it's not true. It's because the why I've always learned, which is, the great thing about all the people in that book, I've worked with, and they're all pretty bloody good. And there's a bit that you learn from every single one of them. And the thing to do is, work with people, see what you can learn, and then mould that onto what you are, because everybody's different. I can literally could go through that book and say for every one of them, that's that bit. James, that's what there's each one of the things. There's a bit of a story.
Yeah, because you talk about in your book about how Rupert Murdoch approached you to get on the board of B-Sky-B. Can you tell us about that story and why perhaps it's sort of so symbolic of Rupert's particular leadership style?
I got a phone call and my secretary said it's Rupert Murdoch, and I said that somebody winding us up, or I'm in terrible trouble, I'm in the news of the world, one of the two. And she said no, it really is, and it was Rupert. And he said, look, we're looking for some non-execs. People have mentioned your name. I'd really like to meet you. Are you around in London in the next 48 hours? And I said, well, unfortunately, I'm not. And he said, well, where will you be? And I said, Hull. And he said, where's that? So I explained to him where it was. And he said, what are you doing there? So I'm going to visit some stores. And he said, oh, come up there. And the very next day, he got on a plane, he flew to Hull, he came to the Asda, he met me in the store. The first thing he did is walk straight up to see where the newspapers were. It was midday, there was no copies of The Sun because we'd sold out. He got the phone, he phoned David Yellen, who was the editor, and said to David, I'm in Hull, which to them they would think, God, what's he doing in Hull? And I'm in this Asda and there aren't any copies of the newspaper, David, what's going on? And well, he got me then, basically. But it's, it's this thing about if you want to do something, do it.
And then the eye for detail, sort of at the same time.
Yeah, well, and also eye for detail, but also, he sent a message which was, I'm Rupert, but I'm out and about. I'm in Hull, and they would be thinking, what is he doing in Hull? He said, I'm in Hull, having a look around. It's a sort of, so the word would go round that he was in Hull, looking around.
One of the things you say about sort of, what's common thread between all of the people you've studied in your book is that not one of them sees their role as sort of, being the head of a popularity contest. So how does that sit with inspirational leadership, where a lot of people want to be inspiring leaders to get a lot of people to love them and want to follow them?
Don't do things just to be popular. Do things because they're the right thing to do. And actually what happens is, if they are the right thing to do, even at the time people don't like them, eventually, because it is the right thing to do, they'll see that, and that's when you become popular, if that's what you want to be. And I guess as there's a classic example for me, which is, that was in the end that was a love relationship. I described it as tough love, and I felt personally responsible for every single person in that organisation, and we've grown up together. We'd come from a complete disaster to something, the best place in the country to work, and that's what that place was voted to be. And so, but it took a lot of time to get there. But in the end, people knew, and it sounds very trite, that I really cared for them, and I knew they all cared for me. And but the big thing was, because of that, we all worked harder. The business was better. It wasn't a love-in for that, it was because the business worked and we all felt really proud about it and part of something.
In your book, you seem to demystify leadership. So, in a nutshell, what's it all about?
There's a lot of smoke and mirrors behind all this stuff, but as I said to you, most of it's common sense. Most of it is what people do every day in some way, shape, or form. And I've always felt this way, that there are very few people I know who aren't capable enough to be better than they are at what they do. And I've always felt that the job of leaders is to make sure that happens. And again, it sounds very trite because I say, oh, what a lovely thing to say. Well, the only reason is, if you do that and others can't do it, your business will be more successful. And in the end, it's all about business.
Bevo